Good morning and welcome to the 30th meeting of the Economy and Fair Work Committee of 2025. Today we will be starting our brief inquiry into the use of AI. But before I begin, I would also just like to note that we have apologies this morning from Lorna Slater. Can I also ask members to agree to take item 3 and all future discussions of our AI inquiry in private? Do members agree? Which allows me to go on to agenda item 2. And I am very pleased that we have a panel with us this morning to help us look at the economic potential of artificial intelligence. And we have Seth Finnegan, the Chief Executive Officer of Informed Solutions, Peter Proud, the Chief Executive Officer of For It, and Sarah Ronald, the founder of Nile. And what I'd ask panellists if they could just keep their answers as concise as possible, though this is an expansive topic, so that may not be possible. And also just to note that you don't need to press your buttons. The staff will do that for you. And I will just begin by asking a couple of questions. I'm very struck when it comes to discussion of AI is that we seem to be sort of stuck in a sort of very binary place where either we're all doomed and all our jobs are going to be taken over by AI, or it's just a bit like kind of the internet and Google and it's just a bit of an upgrade. Just in terms of kind of impact, and given that each of you is working with AI in terms of your day-to-day jobs, what do you think the impact will be, and where in that spectrum of total change or minor change do you think kind of the impact of AI is? And I don't know who would like to go first. I think, Peter, you were sort of maintaining my eye contact longer than anyone else, which is a dangerous thing to do.
So well, people are talking about AI like it's a new thing, but it's not. It's been around for a long time. I think what's changed is it's been consumerised and commoditised. So it's more available to the masses than what it was before. You know, we were working on AI solutions at Microsoft in 96, 97. You know, it's 30 years old. It's pretty old. So I think that's the thing. And it's just a tool. You know, I think one of the things that's worrying is I think we're kind of, I think it's a bit 2000 again, you know, with the kind of the hype of the internet. And so if you look at all the overvalued companies at the moment, you know, the PE ratios are pretty high in a lot of AI companies and stuff. So I think one of the things we should be cognizant of as well is I think there's going to be a kind of reset and a bit of a bubble, and that there's going to be a reset on the valuation of companies moving forward because there's this kind of super hype. And so I don't think AI's been, it's like the internet, right? Up to 2000, the internet, right? And then there was a bit of a bubble because people didn't know how to monetize it. And then now we'll come out the other side and then people will work out how to monetize it. And so I don't think it's going to be Armageddon and there's going to be kind of drones firing rockets at us anytime soon.
It could be.
Maybe. But I think we need to kind of take a balanced view that it's a tool that is very, very powerful and useful and can help business. And actually it can help small companies do big things. But I don't think it's going to be the kind of change everything overnight. Everyone's talking about it, but that's just my opinion.
I mean, is it all hype, or are we seeing a sort of point of acceleration, though?
Well, things are getting faster.
Yeah.
You know.
It's exponential.
Yeah. And so what people need to do is get the underlying capability and infrastructure in place to be able to leverage what they don't know what's coming. So it's all about the ability to be composable with your environments so that you can plug things in. And so it's all about integrations moving forward so that you can actually very quickly pivot and you're not having to throw everything out that you've got before. You know, so what we've been doing for the last 2.5 years, we've been kind of locked in rooms, you know, re-architecting everything within our solutions to make it nice and easy and composable that we can start to, and we're starting to see the benefit of already. So something new comes out, then we just switch it on and plug it in, and we can take advantage of it. So the new kind of agents that are coming out, where you can program agents to do pieces of work. Before it was just general AI, but we now can just switch on the agents very quickly to actually help us. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Sarah, would you agree with that essentially we're maybe getting a bit carried away, but but you said it's exponential.
I don't
change.
think we're getting carried away. I think that we're missing a bit of an opportunity. Like for right now, AI enables massive productivity growth, right? And what do we need right now? Massive productivity growth. So if I take my company as an example, the comparison this year in terms of our growth to last year is 73%. That's really high. And we haven't had to increase our operating costs that much from the year previous. And the reason for that is that we spent a lot of time working on our AI infrastructure and the agents to enable our team to do more than they were able to in the old ways of working, right? That's the bit that I think we, for the economy, we need to really be leveraging. It's not about efficiencies, it's about productivity.
Yes, I'd certainly second that. We, as a business, we've had substantial growth in the last sort of 2 or 3 years, and I think that's been supported by an operation that has become AI enabled. That's allowed us to grow and stay very, very productive. It's about creating new value. For us, it's not about cutting jobs. It's about actually employing more people doing higher value work. Back to your original question, I mean, I think AI does have the potential to be genuinely transformational in the same way that computers were, and in the same way that internet has been. The trick to that is pointing out where it's going to be transformational, where it works, and where it works less well. And I think that's then points to the wisdom of the AI action plan that the government will be considering. It's trying to find those sectors where the most value can be created. And I'd suggest you can be a consumer of AI, you can be a supplier of AI. I think, though, an interesting sort of third way is where you intersect AI power with the high growth sectors that you have here in Scotland: life sciences, healthcare, clean energy. Actually targeting your AI action plan on those sectors, finding the very real use cases where you will transform productivity, you will transform competitiveness. I think that's where the most value lies. There's a lot of hype, there's a lot of myth around, but they are very real concerns as well around privacy, security, and the outlook for staff as well. They need to be tackled as part of any action plan as well.
Thank you. Sarah, I was wondering if I was going to ask a second question about SMEs, and you said something quite interesting about the trajectory of your company's growth, and that you're 70% growth, but on the same cost base, because AI allows you to be more,
the same operational cost base, but
so,
some new jobs created.
But one of my concerns is we're seeing large businesses are twice as likely to adopt AI as small, and actually I wonder if we're missing the trick here, that actually AI has the possibility of almost turning economies of scale on their head. Do we need to concentrate a lot more on making sure that all small businesses kind of seek to use the AI and leverage AI in the way that startups will almost naturally do? Yeah. I mean, I was just wondering kind of what your thoughts were about that and what we can do to help that.
Yeah, so startups will what you call greenfield. So they are not going to be constrained by legacy infrastructure like a business like mine has. We've built it. Current ways of working, existing ways of working, infrastructure, technology, that costs money and time to change. And so whilst we've had growth, we've absolutely had to have that growth to pay for the change to become AI relevant. You know, it costs, at the moment, we're spending probably 30,000 a month just on the AI, on subscriptions, on non-billable staff to build the tools that we now need for the team whilst running the business of today at the same time. So yes, I think smaller businesses absolutely need to get on board. And the thing is, if they don't start now, the cost of that change becomes greater and greater. And whilst we're spending that amount at the moment, those costs are going to go up as the model makers that provide the underlying layer of our tooling, they're going to change the pricing. At the moment, it's quite cheap because they need to get adoption. But in time, that's going to go up. So if these companies, if our smaller companies, SMEs, aren't adopting it right now, it's just going to get harder and harder.
Seth, Peter, would you agree with that?
I would just add to that. A lot of small companies are adopting AI now, maybe without without knowing it, because some people are taking a path where it's more bespoke to their company, and as Sarah said, they're building their own models and agents to help what they do. But I don't know, let's take something just simple and administrative. If a company has a lot of expenses and you use some modern SaaS software as a service expenses tool, there'll be AI running in the background doing image processing of all of your expenses. So you're using AI already, or using AI every time you search on one of the major search engines. So it's becoming sort of ubiquitous within the tools that companies use. I think, as has been mentioned already, companies face the choice about whether that's enough for them, or whether they actually need to do something a bit more bespoke to their business model that gives them a competitive advantage, and then you will be investing in more higher value skills.
Because the additional point on that, actually, to build is if you're as a company, if you just continually use other people's solutions and you're not building something of your own, your data is there's value in your data, and that gives you a competitive edge. But if you don't invest in your own tooling, that data is going to be with everybody else. You're not creating your own competitive advantage. And so the choice for us was, well, we need to make sure that all this 20 years of data that we have working in an FS and regulated environments, we don't want to put that onto other people's tooling. We're going to build our own so that at least we can have more potential in the age of AI that's coming to be higher value, to have control. So I think there's something about the data sovereignty.
Yeah.
There is a counter to that with big companies as well. One of the hardest things in business in a big organisation, so I'm thinking back to my time at Microsoft, is cannibalisation of existing business models. So actually, there's a kind of concept of jumping the S-curve. So you do well in one generation, you've got to jump the S-curve onto the next one. And big organisations sometimes, and when you get to the top and start to go down, that's called the near-death experience of a company. There's books on this. If you don't kind of jump onto the next S-curve wave, then if you look at companies like Compaq and ICL and DEC and you can keep on going on. They've not made that shift and that jump, so therefore they're no longer. So there's two sides to this. You did say there that the adoption of AI across big companies, that's what seems to be what's in the news at the moment. But actually to change their fundamental business models, whereby, if you think about consultants and all the billable hours and things that's now been replaced by AI, in-house in companies, then that actually is going to significantly affect their business model. So, there is a kind of yin and a yang to that.
Well, look, thank you very much for those introductory answers. And I'd like to bring in some of my colleagues, starting with the Deputy Convener, Michelle Thompson. Michelle.
Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. And we've kind of jumped right in with the heavy brogues here, haven't we, to use a Scottish phrase. But just taking it back up a level, and I suspect in some sense it's for the record, because, people will be watching this session, people will be poring over the kind of words that you use. So you've mentioned productivity, Sarah, but obviously that's an outcome, we hope, of using AI. But I'd just like your sense from all of you in terms of your businesses, the areas where you think it could add economic value. And I'm thinking, obviously, there's a whole range of areas, supply chains, for example, obviously automation, we would all know that. But I'd just like to get a sense from you and just put some stuff on the record before we carry on. Thank you. Sarah, you go first.
So I can say where the use cases where we're using it. Back office, so we've done loads in the finance function, because you tend to find the things that are not necessarily cognitive work. Like, we want our team consultants to be spending much more time with clients doing cognitive thinking, new thinking, but a lot of their day is taken up doing stuff that is input-output. So wherever there's an input-output, we're trying to automate and put agents in there to, so the creation of proposals. Well, we've got proposal agents that now, if the sales team are on a call, that call gets recorded, it gets synthesized in our tool that we've built, and then the agent will create a follow-up. Once that follow-up's been confirmed, then it can actually go ahead and create a proposal. It can go into our data store of our company. So all those proposals that we've ever built on the same use case, for example, onboarding in a bank, a retail bank, it will pull all those examples and those outcomes, put it into the proposal, And then the salesperson, that might have taken them ages, hours, previously to do that one task, and they won't have known all the work that the company has previously done. So they would have then souped up time from their colleagues. Hey, do you know, have we done this, solved this problem before? So all of that, that's just one example where we're able to point AI at a high value outcome that has easy for the salesperson to use, but creates a much better solution for the client and for us. So it's about experience and productivity.
And institutional memory
Institutional
as well.
memory, yeah. So we,
Yeah.
you know, in the services world, as soon as somebody leaves, they take those relationships with them and they take that knowledge. And that's always been a problem we've been trying to solve over the years. And now we actually can, because we've taken all that data and, you know, it was in PDFs, it's all over the place, but we've managed to consolidate it and put it in a readable form for the agents so they can go and retrieve it. And that data, that information, that is of high value to Nile. So we add on, you know, market value as well as making ourselves more productive.
So obviously you also referenced automation, but I'll bring in yourself, Peter, now as well, but just a generic sense of where you think AI can add economic value.
And we're using it extensively. So, you know, we've built a platform for running really big secure websites for big clients that are heavily regulated. So, you know, one client in the last 3 months, the AI tools that we've got at the front end have blocked 3.9 million cyber attacks in 3 months. So bot attacks, denial of service attacks, SQL injections, you know, so we, you know, the AI tools have picked that up and stopped that. You know, when it comes to making us more efficient as an organisation, you know, before it used to take us weeks and months to migrate clients over, you know, onto our platforms and systems. Now we're using agents to go and read what they've got already, break their website down into components, start to recode automatically, you know, and it's kind of the 80-20 rule. We get about 80% of it done. So, you know, when it comes to kind of identifying all the assets and imagery that's on a website, it could take weeks or maybe a couple of months to do. We'll do that in 10 minutes now. And then what the system will do is it will take that picture and it'll do a call to a, you know, AI reader, and it'll put all the metadata around about it. So all the tagging and everything's done already. So that kind of thing. So it means that, you know, it makes us way more efficient to be able to go and sell into clients, to be able to do the expensive part at the start. You know, the capital cost of migrations is significantly coming down. So it's that kind of stuff. You know, we use it for search, we use it for, so, you know, for a global company, we took 10 weeks out of a 12-week process for taking an English master website and taking it across 90 languages. So they were able to do a global launch of new products in one go instead of a 3-month rolling launch. So when you think about a multi-billion-pound company, that's significant for them. So it's that kind of thing that we're using the tools and the agents to do. And so, you know, we're not using it to replace people's jobs. We're using it to be able to, you know, grow and make our business more efficient without having to exponentially increase the cost of our business.
Seth?
Maybe to sort of talk, I suppose, potentially for the record, more broadly about, in our experience, how AI can create, first of all, economic value for individual businesses, and you've heard great examples there. But, I mean, we talked about how AI can be used to automate processes. AI can be used for predictive analytics. So I've got better prediction across supply and demand, for instance. There are companies using AI to improve fraud detection because it's very good at pattern recognition and identifying anomalies. You mentioned supply chain optimization. Again, any problem where you've got a multifaceted, there's so many dimensions to it, and a puzzle you're trying to solve, and supply chain is one of those. AIs can be a great help in predicting supply and demand across that. And then finally, AI helps us sort of create whole new business models, whole new services, so it gives us competitive edge, it gives us innovation as well. So all of those factors can apply at the business level. I think what's interesting when you look at a list like that, we talk about AI as a single term. Actually, if you broke that list down and say, well, what are the AI interventions you're making to get those benefits? There's many different forms of AI. You know, natural language processing, deep learning, predictive analytics. Everyone, of course, now is talking about large language models just because of what's in the mainstream now. I think, you know, in any conversation around AI and in the creation of any AI action plan as well, it's considering the different outcomes you want from the different types of intervention. There's different ways of creating economic value from different types of AI intervention. I think that list applies to, to businesses. How can AI, though, help the whole economy? I mean, you're seeing it, we're seeing it here now in Scotland with the investment in the plans around AI growth zones, the investment in the Edinburgh supercomputer. So there's investment and growth that comes from becoming an AI expert. I think one consideration, though, about its addition to the economy as a whole, I would suggest it's good to back what you're already strong at. There are hyperscalers in the world that are investing more in AI than many nations on their own could match. And so it's deciding where you want to play. What's your centre of excellence in the broad spectrum of AI capability that will be delivered? And as I mentioned earlier, I think there's something to be said for looking at where you're strong already and what your sectors are of the future here in Scotland, and building AI capability and centres of excellence around those sectors.
Thank you.
Yeah. One thing to think about, and we've not touched on this yet, if we want to be, just going on to the point from Seth there, to decide where you're playing, if we want to be serious and start to build data centres, to actually deliver these services ourselves, then I think the discussion is power, because people don't understand how much power these things take. So, if you think about the clusters, because it's not a data centre, you need 3 data centres. They need to be within 12 miles of each other for latency. And the power of that is about 300 to 400 megawatts per server per day, right? So, megawatt hours, sorry, 300 megawatt hours. So, that's 1.2 gigawatts of power maximum. The biggest hydro station we have in Scotland only produces 400 megawatts, so we don't have the power just now. If you look at Ireland, I think Ireland's between 25 and 33% of all Irish power is going to 2 companies, Amazon and Microsoft, for their data centres. So the citizens of Ireland use less electricity than 2 companies for the data centres in Ireland. So there's a discussion here to be had around power, because the data centres are competing with the citizens for their kettle, sort of thing. So that's the discussion to be had as well. And if Scotland does not want to go down the nuclear route, which it doesn't, then that kind of negates us to quite a lot of the data centre discussions.
Sarah Boyer to come in on exactly those issues. So
you're absolutely right. There's a discussion to be had about that, and I know one of my colleagues is going to come in on that, so I won't steal their thunder. No. You're absolutely right to bring it out. I wanted to just turn it, though, to the public sector. You're sitting here as experts, and we're all in the public sector, and I've got a couple of questions in there. Somebody referenced some of the work that the Scottish Government's doing, but an open question to, in your opinion, to what extent does government and the public sector get AI? And the reason I ask that is that historically, particularly around the civil service, there's a culture. And the culture is slow and deliberative and thoughtful and reflective. And actually, that has worked very well in many areas. But the reason I'm asking that is, to what extent could that prevailing culture, which has great strengths, be potentially a weakness when we look at the exponential growth of AI? Sarah, you nodded, so you need to come in on that first.
I'm going to revere to Seth, I think, so I have opinions, but I purposely don't do any work in the public sector. And the reason for that is I think the velocity is so slow, and there's a risk aversion, and I think that really counteracts what you're trying to do, what we're trying to do in terms of change. But Seth and I were having a chat down in the lobby, and your business does a whole lot more, so you're probably better informed.
We do. Thanks, Sarah. So yeah, we do a lot of work UK-wide and up here in Scotland as well, public sector, and we have done for over 30 years. And we've seen different waves of innovation come through departments and agencies and how they've responded to that. I mean, what I would say is that in the last sort of 15 years in Scotland and across the UK, actually government has done a very good job of getting on the front foot with digital. the digital services here in Scotland and in the UK, I think, are really something to be proud of. It's not an easy job to transform organisations with already deep-seated culture through technology. As you've mentioned, and I fully agree, a lot of that culture is absolutely appropriate. And in an age where you can speed everything up and potentially automate things, you need to be quite careful about how you step into that. And I think elements of the culture actually support quite a wise posture to leaping into AI, at worst, blindly. In my experience, though, I think there are barriers to adoption. They're reasonably well-known barriers. Some of them are structural, like the legacy systems, legacy data, legacy skills. Some of them, though, are less at the technology side. As I say, I think you've got a strong digital service here in Scotland. In order to get the benefits from AI or any other technical innovation, you've got to understand how it transforms your operating model. You've got to understand how you can take your workforce through that journey as well. And that's a leadership job. And I think often when we talk about AI and AI skills, so much is attached to, are we going to train everyone to be machine learning engineers? Are we going to train everyone to understand exactly how to prompt something like ChatGPT? Well, maybe, but actually the benefit will be driven by transformation and change. And that's a leadership job. And I think there could be more spent at leadership level in civil services, and we operate globally as well, civil services around the world, so that they understand how AI can change the way that their agencies and departments work for the better, safely and responsibly. So yeah, I think in summary, I think those barriers that you've identified do exist, but they are the barriers that are familiar with anyone trying to go through transformation. I don't think AI is necessarily any different to driving the transformation the internet was or digital was.
Peter, do you want to add anything?
I've only really worked in the health, NHS. I've kind of spent most of my time in private sector rather than public sector. I can see why Sarah's taken that strategy. The slowness in the health service here is unbelievable. You know, we're talking, you know, we've just finished a piece of work, which is quite a large proof of concept, and we've live across 150 sites. And to go to the next phase, they're saying it's going to take another 18 months worth of procurement. And you're like, well, we've just proved it and we've just finished it and it's all working, so why is it going to take another 18 months? And I think the health service, because of the fragmented nature and the 23 different boards, you know, I think it's 17 geographic and 5 or 6, you know, kind of boards, you know, it's very, very complicated. And it's very difficult to put in national infrastructure across the health service because they're all individual buy-in. So if you want to start to leverage this stuff, you need a collective. And I think the way that the money sits in Scottish Government, but the buy-in sits locally in each of the health boards, that makes it very difficult and very slow to do anything. And I kind of feel sorry for the people in the middle that are trying to coordinate it all. So, and I'm just talking about not just AI, that's across all of kind of high tech.
Yeah, and Seth, before you come back in, I just want to introduce one last thread, because I know my colleagues are keen to come in, and that is of data. I was recently in Lithuania, and they've created what they call a data lake, which is a kind of aggregated data set of all their public sector data. And of course, that's going to be immensely powerful when you start to look at preventative spend. So before I leave, I'd like your last reflections on that. Where are we at in data, and do you have the sense of understanding of how important it is? But Seth, you come in and then we'll just finish off that point.
Well, maybe it was just because I recognise the challenges that Peter's identified there, but also just to tell maybe a sort of success story, which I think deserves it from Scottish Government. We won a CivTech award about 3 or 4 years ago, to work with NatureScot to transform how NatureScot operates its planning process and its consultation process in sensitive areas. And we analysed the end-to-end planning process with all of the expertise within NatureScot. We picked about 3 or 4 different AI interventions across that service. We built a platform co-designed with NatureScot, an AI and data platform. We built that platform, we piloted it. We went through some of the business change with them about how that would change the caseworkers' workflows, And then we're rolling that out nationally now. And that, that's made a huge difference. I mean, that's not just 10 or 20% productivity gains in different parts of that workflow. Triage, in how the SSSIs are handled, we're seeing productivity gains of 40-50% plus. That's a real success, and it's, I'm proud to say on behalf of Nature Scott, it's won awards. It's won awards from the Digital Planning Awards, actually, that were sponsored by the Scottish Government. So there really are success stories out there, not just of technology enablement, but of the business change that goes with it that drives efficiencies. And I think it's worth just putting that on record. And there are successes out there. Too many pilots fail. Sometimes they're the ones that get the headlines. I think there's a lot quietly going on, a lot more than people maybe realise. And maybe just back to your point on data, I think there is a strong appreciation of the importance of data, the importance of facilitating data exchange, facilitating common data platforms and a common, once for Scotland, approach to data. There are challenges because of the structural legacy that takes time, effort, and funding to overcome. But I think in terms of strategy, there is a real appreciation here of the value of bringing data together in common platforms that makes it available for many different uses, including through AI tools as well.
Last comments from Peter and Sarah on the data point.
Go down. I mean, that's not new technology again, right? Data lakes have been around forever. So if you think about, let's use the health service as an example, right? Everyone in Scotland's already got a KI number, so there's an identifier. And if you think about it, a data lake is just a series of schemas that's tied to that KI number. So, if you've got, prostate cancer, you've got a Gleason score. If you're, having a baby, there's an APGAR score. There's a, blood pressure score. There's a whole raft of data points and data sets for every single, citizen. So if you actually start to take a citizen's approach to data rather than an application approach to data, if you've got all of the citizens' data in that one layer, in that one KI number or that one national insurance number or whatever the identifier is, when you start to build, so I don't know if you want to build an app for diabetes, you use that data lake, and all you're doing is you've got a front end, you're building the front end application for it, and it does a call to that, it gets the information and puts it back again, right? It's that simple, right? But the hard part is getting the data lake in the first place. So, I think, and I know there's a lot of good work going on just now in the Scottish Government around about having a data lake that starts to go down this route. So, and it is a lot easier, and going back to Sarah's point earlier on about a greenfield site, it's a lot easier. Yeah, Estonia, yeah. So if you've got a greenfield site, then it's easy, and it's easy to start. It's like you've still got the cost of keeping all the legacy systems running, while you've got the capital cost of building the new. And one of the things I think about, we did a lot of this work internally in Microsoft, and Microsoft takes a very harsh approach in that it switches things off. So once the new thing was in place, then the legacy was switched off. What happens in government, it often gets left on. So then for a long time, and I think one of the problems in government I've found is time isn't money, in the same way that it's in public sector. So therefore, projects drift, and I was on one of the advisory committees, and how dare I suggest putting red, amber, green against a government project, because that would terrify everybody. But, you need to take a much harsher approach to projects with, red, amber, green. I actually said, well, we could use violet, magnolia and rose. But there needs to be a much harsher approach to how projects are run, because you need to, time is money, even though it's not deemed that way in some public sector projects.
Yeah. Final word from Sarah.
Well, I think just on that point, I think that gets back to organisational incentives.
Yeah.
So, Michelle, to your point about culture and the civil service, unless you're looking at organisational incentives, you're not going to motivate people to put deployment. Like, if you're working on an AI initiative, actually incentivise the civil service to deploy. But right now, I think it's more likely that if they deployed something that was 85% accurate, they would get hauled over whatever what do? You put them up in some kind of, in front of a committee, select committee or something. And they would get over, and therefore, if that's the likely route, they're going to stall on that deployment and look for perfection. And therefore, you know, that categories up into we don't get the velocity that we need as a country in terms of, you know, the change. Yeah.
Thank you.
And on the data libraries, there's a national data library. I think we're way behind on the announcements. And again, getting back to that theme of velocity, there seems to be more on the announcements about what's going to happen, but not the, okay, and here's the plan, and here's when it's going to be delivered, and actually all the communication after that point being, and you know, this is from the time of that announcement to the time that the first pound was put down. This is the KPI, the key KPI that we're measuring. So again, back to organisational incentives and KPIs and running more like a business, I think. It's the only language I know.
Whole different thread. I won't
Yeah.
go into that. Thank you very much, Convener. Thank you.
Well, yes, both it's sort of the culture of announcements and the use of RAG status in the public sector could be a whole inquiry on itself. But we won't go down that route. I'd like to bring in Sarah Boyack.
Thank you, Convener. I'd like to come back to the topic we nearly got to in terms of energy use and environmental impact of AI. And there are both positive and challenges that potentially come up. Huge increase in electricity potentially used, but you could join up the dots in terms of excess energy production. But you've also got challenges. I think, interestingly, a report by PwC 6 years ago and then by LSE last year showed that we could reduce our greenhouse gas emissions through better use of AI in transport, agriculture, water and energy, and also looking at food consumption. So there are big pluses, but how do we get that built in? Because the Scottish Government's AI strategy doesn't have a section on environmental or energy policy. So is this a big missed opportunity if you don't join up the dots and make it central stage? You'd like to come in? There was a bit of nodding there from you, Seth.
To come in, you're right. It's a balance of benefits and disbenefits, and that points always to measurement and knowing where we are and being able to strategise around that. I think if our own, let's talk as a business and relate that to at a nation level, our own AI charter and AI policy has a section in that on sustainability. We're just going through ISO 42000 to be accredited for our AI systems, and part of that is again considerations on sustainability, just as considerations on our carbon footprint as a business is core to everything we do. It starts with measurement, and awareness again on both sides of the equation, and always building in a carbon reduction plan. And that applies. I think that applies at a national level as much as it does on an individual business level. When it comes to, I suppose, the strategy itself, I think that's something that should be evolved, if you like, and if there is an updated AI action plan, then bringing sustainability into the action plan would be an important element of that. It's in our businesses AI action plan. You do, back to the earlier topic about data centres, they are very real challenges. You do have a great clean energy sector here and a very fast growing clean energy sector here, and a lot of renewable energy potential here, and that needs to be harnessed. So much of getting the benefit out of new technology and innovation is about joining things up, joining up what you're great at and what you're going to be great at in the future with the challenges and the benefits that you see today. And I think how you bring in your clean tech and renewable sector into the advancement of AI in Scotland will be absolutely critical to its success.
And is that something you're aware of? Because we pay 250 million constraints to turn off the turbines every year in Scotland at the moment, and yet data centres could be using that energy in an efficient way.
It's not just the power as well. If you think about Scotland, I mean, Scotland's got three things I think in abundance, right? It's got clean air, water, and we're one of the freest nations on the planet. There's the freedom here. It's not until you travel around the world you realise how free we are in Scotland. And so if you think about and also the temperature of the air is really important, because air conditioning in data centres needs to be switched on once the temperature outside gets above 28 degrees centigrade. And, it hits the front pages of the news when it goes above 28 degrees centigrade in Scotland for a heat wave. So, we've got the cool air. So the cooling is quite efficient here. we've got the water. You know, if you look in California just now, you know, there's sinkholes appearing in California because there's the underground lakes are actually dry, you know, through the kind of the agriculture and data centres. So we've got a couple of things. I think it's the consistent power, you know. So you know, we could be looking at technology that pumps water up high into the highlands, so when there's excess wind, we could be pumping to high reservoirs water, and then it's a bit like a capacitor that's holding that energy, and then once the wind drops down, then we can just switch the water on and let it run down the hills, you know, through pipes and you know, power turbo hydro. So there's that kind of, yeah, so it's pump hydro. So there's that kind of, you know, if we start to think that way, going back to Seth's point about the connected strategy, you know, using the wind to create kind of pump hydro, you know, for when the wind's not blowing, it's that kind of joined up thinking that I think we're in quite a strong position to do. But, you know, and also, you know, we've got a lot of, you know, we've got a lot of empty space in Scotland where it's not populated. It's pretty close to the population. You know, so there's a lot of things going that we've got going for us. I think the bit that's lacking is just that consistent power that we probably just don't have enough of it to kind of create our own data centres. So I know it's not answering the question around about AI, but it's actually talking about the infrastructure, which actually you need infrastructure to actually have AI in the first place.
It's having that joined up approach though, isn't
Yeah.
it? Because both PwC and LSE actually talked about significant carbon reductions.
Yeah.
We're just talking about reusing more energy in a joined up way, but given it's one of our biggest challenges, what's the awareness in the sector about the opportunities that could come through this? Does it need to be more centre stage in the strategy?
Do you mean opportunities for?
Well, the prediction by PwC was you could reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 4%. That's pretty big through energy, water, transport and agriculture. If you join up with AI, that would be a big opportunity.
I've not seen that before, but I think I'll have a look at it. But I think,
Yep.
you know, anything. I mean, anything that gives. I mean, 4% is actually doesn't sound a big number, but actually it's such a big number. You know, on the other side, 4% is huge, right? So, you know, it is worth looking at. I certainly know, certainly from my time working for a big organisation that created a lot of greenhouse gas, you know, and through the earlier years of the organisation, that the companies like Microsoft have actually got a positive strategy to go and clean up everything they've actually created from day one. So it is possible to do. It is getting down to efficiency, right? It's about, you know, teaching the population to use smart power and using the power at the right times. You know, I think that's something that you can do a lot of, and there's a lot smarter, you know, around about smarter metering and stuff. And I think that gets back to education. But you know,
Report said that nudging and behavioural change
Yeah.
could be assisted through use of AI,
yeah,
making people aware.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, have you got any comments you want to add in there, Sarah, about how we make sure this actually happens?
So have we got one data centre planned? What's the? I heard rumours of one in.
Well, I think there are a series of data centres planned in Scotland.
In Scotland.
It's not just one.
Okay.
It's a big opportunity, so it's how you do that joined up thinking.
How many are we likely to?
Well, there have been several suggested for Edinburgh. Was it 3 that were suggested in Edinburgh? Talked about the one out at Heriot-Watt University, but there are others in conversation across the country. So it's not just a one-off.
Yeah.
And linking into energy storage at the same time. The other issue I was going to ask about was energy security, because there are times when the system shuts down in certain places when we have extreme weather. Is that factored into AI in terms of if it suddenly cuts off, what happens?
No, there was a major incident. Did you have the incident last week? There was a major incident last week. Yeah, where literally all of our stuff just stopped working. I was like, what the?
Yeah. Everything stopped for us.
Everything stopped, and it was it was
Happened in here as well. Yes.
an LLM. Yeah, it was a source problem with the LLMs, and so that really gave us a bit of a wake up call. Like, oh my God, we are so dependent.
What happened was there was this little blip of an outage about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and the team it's a technology called Front Door, right, which actually is a kind of single point of failure. It's a kind of it's the entry point for all services. I mean, it got right down to tachometers and lorries. You know, this service runs a tacho, so the lorries couldn't drive because they couldn't monitor the hours that they were driving for. So this technology called Front Door actually crashed globally for
AWS.
Microsoft. It was Microsoft.
I think it might
Yeah.
have interrupted our parliamentary voting.
Yeah.
So,
Really?
yeah.
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 So, and what happened 3 weeks ago? There was a minor blip with it, and then they did a patch to fix it, and that patch actually dragged everything down globally. So that's not a power thing. It was actually probably a person thing. We
Person
probably
thing.
said, yeah, it was a team thing where a team actually made a mistake. But this needs. So I run bank websites, right? Our services and systems need to run 365 days a year, 100% of the time. So this is mission critical compute, right? And actually, luckily for us, the banks and everybody were suffering in all their services and systems, not just mine, when that outage happened last week. So we were, it wasn't like it was our fault, so we were exonerated in that outage. But you're absolutely right. Power security and power consistency is critical when it comes to these things.
Right, that's really useful. I think that joining it into the artificial intelligence strategy, both about environment and carbon emissions, but also that potential for energy security challenge.
Yeah.
That's really helpful evidence. I wanted to move on to a totally different topic now, which is that about culture. And we've seen lots of discussions in the news about the impact of artificial intelligence, unintended sometimes and other times not, in terms of the impact on artists, musicians and authors, in terms of the work that they do and data and copyright laws not keeping up with artificial intelligence because it's just moving so fast. But there was also a good report by UNESCO which talked about a north-south divide as well in terms of access to digital knowledge and skills because AI crosses countries. So I wonder if any of you have thought about that cultural impact because, again, potential big opportunities, powerful opportunities and could strengthen our cultural and creative industries, but at the same time unintended consequences in terms of lack of access to digital and also just taking work that's been done by artists, authors, actors, musicians. Any of you been involved in the discussion on this before?
So,
Peter?
yeah, sorry about this. So I would urge you all to watch a television show that was on last week. It's on Channel 4. It was Dispatch's AI Will Steal Our Jobs. And it's actually worth watching. I actually watched it again last night before I came here because I wanted to just kind of refresh myself before I came in. But they had a photographer, a musician, a lawyer and a doctor. And they had real life scenarios where they each had to do their job. And they had AI compete against them to do their job. So the doctor and AI, the doctor kind of won. And the AI solution didn't quite diagnose everything. But it did it in kind of 15 minutes, whereas the doctor took about 2.5 hours to get through the clinic of 6 patients. And actually, but the AI solution referred it to the right person straight away, to the right service, right? So the specialist would have picked it up. The lawyer, the lawyer got beat. And the fees were like 100 instead of 1,200. The photographer got beat. So the magazine picked the AI solution for the models. The musician won. So the musical score that they laid down for a 2-minute session for the film that they were showing, AI failed and the musician won on that one. So it's actually worth watching. It's one of the best pieces of journalism I've seen when it came to AI and how it interacts and competes with people's jobs. So it's on Channel 4 Dispatches, AI Will Take Your Jobs. I think you should actually watch that for this committee.
And I think the point being that at the moment AI is really good at regurgitating.
Yeah.
So, and if that data, that source data is really well categorised, then the answer, as in legal accounting, is normally very, very good. Whereas for the more artistic, where you're looking at net new, the artificial models, LLMs, do not do that particularly well.
So earlier this year, I got diagnosed with prostate cancer, and when you get diagnosed with these things, I got sent 12 sheets of paper that I did not understand. I mean, I'm talking, I could not understand the terminology or the measurement matrix or anything. I didn't understand anything about it. So I took a picture with my phone, I put it into OneNote, I got OneNote to read it, I stuck it into Copilot and said, tell me what I've got. explain the terms and references, and tell me the treatment. And I got a 3-page summary in about 2 minutes, exactly right. So when I saw my consultant at the first consultation after I'd been diagnosed, I said, right, here's what I think. What do you think? And he was like, are you a doctor? And I was like, no. But this is what I did. And I showed him the tools. And it took me about 10 minutes to do the research. And he said I was the most informed patient he'd ever seen. So if you think about what this means, this is not just from, for government and organisational side, this is for the citizen as well. So I think what we need to do is we need to start teaching the citizen that they can actually make themselves not experts in something, but actually have a more informed discussion with other professionals when it comes to things like that. And this is all commodity technology that I already had on my laptop. I didn't actually go and get anything. So if you think about it, when I actually said, right, this is what I think I need, and he went, right, that's right. And then so therefore we spent 90% of the time talking about what I had and how to fix it, rather than him spend 90% of his time stopping me crying and getting upset about the diagnosis I've just had, right? So it's like, that's where we can start to really kind of benefit Scotland as well, is actually getting people to have that engagement with professionals by being more informed through AI.
That's a really good example of opportunities and benefits, but I was also asking about the data and copyright issues in terms of protecting artists, musicians, people's cultural rights, which could be about consent to use what they have created. It could be about compensation. I was just wondering, is that something you're up for coming in on?
I'm afraid I'm no expert on the copyright laws or that particular sector, so I was going to just come in on something that Peter said there, which I think is, what Peter's example there points to, that change and transformation in workforces and people's jobs and livelihoods and their craft through AI needs to be people-led. I think we have the challenge ourselves as a business. So we have an AI in the business initiative, and what we've done very intentionally is make that staff-led, and that each own team learns about the AI tools that could help their particular team, how it could help their jobs, which new skills they could have, and then they're creating their own learning pathways as well to become more an AI-enabled team. Now, I think that's really beginning to work, because that's not been just a top-down board-level initiative. We've actually given this to the people that will be using the AI tools, and it's for them to work out how they can get the benefits, how they can avoid the disbenefits, and what new training and skills and awareness they need to build up to become really competent at using these tools. And I think if you apply how AI will change the jobs in any sector, there's real lessons to be learned from that. Uplifting people's awareness, and again pointing to some of what Peter said, uplifting people's awareness and capability around AI benefits us all. And in every single contract that we have, we always bake in that we'll do upskilling and provide some free knowledge transfer and free training as well around AI tools and AI techniques. Because in the end, if we're going to get the transformation right, and we're not going to see headlines that set us back in the press, then we need to create aware and capable workforce, and that will apply in the creative sectors as much as anywhere else. There are specific copyright issues that you point to, but I'm afraid I'm not a particular expert on that.
There's a bigger problem here as well, right? I think it's round about security. So when you watch this Dispatches programme, they did what somebody did to me recently, and I saw this before. The first time I knew about this technology, so one of my friends in Seattle got a video of me talking online, made that into an avatar, if you like, but it wasn't really an avatar, it was a real life. And when he did a Teams call with me, he did the Teams call as me. Right, so I was looking at myself, and when I told people in the office, somebody actually said, "You would actually love that," but that was a separate thing. But what's frightening about that and terrifying is if you think about, a politician, standing up and saying, "I hate Israel," right, just as an example, okay. By the time that you've actually had a chance to correct that, a lot of damage has already been done, right?
Can was impersonated
Right, yeah. I did not know, and I'll get back to the question, because the only time I know of a case of that was the person who did the adverts for ScotRail. That person's voice was stolen, so therefore I think it was a court case, and I think she did win, right? So the law needs to the law does need to catch up, right? But copyright's been around for a long time, and talent management, etc. That's been around for a long time. But I think it's not just the stealing of people's creativity and ideas; it's actually the stealing of people's identity. So when I saw that demonstration of myself speaking to me, you know, immediately I spoke to our teams to make sure that we wouldn't pay for anything like finance. So I could go on a Teams call and say to my finance person, you know, transfer 70 grand to that person over there for a bill that we've got, because they would have done it because it was my voice and my face on the other side of a Teams call. So it's not just about, you know, so there's actually a real issue coming, you know, and one of the things I'm scared of, because I'm kind of getting old now, I'm kind of 56, you know, when I'm 70, what's people going to be able to convince me of? Because I'm kind of not quite with it, like you know, starting to get a bit more, you know, there is a thing there around about, you know, identity and is that person, and we were talking about this yesterday, branches and banks are going to have to start opening up again because people are going to have to go and present themselves as individuals because there's no other way of identifying them as who they are without actually standing in front of you, because the synthesised and, you know, AI generated image of that person is so real, the person themselves can't tell it's not them. And you'll see this if you watch this television show.
Yeah, I'm sold. I'm watching that Channel 4 documentary. Thank you,
There's a really
Sarah.
good opportunity for Scotland just on that, because Scotland, I think, was the first to publish an AI strategy, 2020, 2021. And the basis of that is trust, ethics.
Yeah.
So if we're able to have regulations and controls around that point that you're making,
Yeah.
Peter, I think that's... But I don't know if we've done much other than say, here's the strategy. I did try to find out, didn't find much. So
That's been really helpful because it was a nice illustration of the massive opportunities, but the scale of the tech is moving so fast.
Yeah.
And that global issue in particular, it doesn't matter where you live in the world, this is now.
Yeah.
But it's how you have regulations, protecting data copyright, that whole identity issue. So trust, ethics. So it may be good stuff for us to feed back into the government's AI strategy because it's moving so fast. We want to both benefit but don't miss out. That's been very helpful. Thank you.
Thank
Back
you.
to you,
And there's
Convener.
some supplementaries just on some of those answers. First of all, from Murdo Fraser and then from Kevin Stewart. Murdo.
Thanks, Convener. Good morning, panel. It was actually a follow-up to the earlier line of questioning around data centres. And Peter, you were talking about the grid issues. I met SSE Transmission on Monday, and we were talking about this. Their view is that right now, the attractiveness of Scotland as a place to put data centres is not great due to what they call the latency of the grid, by which means the reliability. And you know, we can get there, as you fairly said, but that will require huge upgrades in transmission, much more battery storage, pump storage. That's years away and will come at massive cost. So I don't know whether you've got any thoughts on what the likely timescale is to get a data centre built here, because from what they were saying, we're talking 5–10 years at least.
Yeah. And also, you know, and I know this is a very, very difficult political topic, but you need to look at the micro reactors for nuclear to be able to generate the kind of power you need in such a small localised area. So and I know that there's a no nuclear in Scotland policy, so that's counter for now, but that's counter to the requirements of power needed with reliable, sustainable power. And actually, there is an argument how green is nuclear, right? Because there can be an argument that it's quite a green power source.
Great. Okay, that was it. Unless anybody else wants to add, that was it. Thank you.
I thought you were going to express your relief you're no longer a practising solicitor, given the insight about the whole job.
Yes.
Kevin.
Thank you, Convener. I want to go back to Peter's point around about his interaction with the health service and the diagnosis letter, 12 pages, which you whittled down using AI to 3. And the fact that the doctor said that you were so well informed. And I'm playing devil's advocate here because already, you know, the health service even some of us at points, are overburdened by folk who diagnose themselves. Some folk do suffer from hypochondria. How do we get over the fact that folk like that may use AI systems and then appear to public services or even private companies and say, look, this is where I'm at, do something about it?
I mean, I can't answer that because that was the first time I see my doctor in about 25 years, so I don't think I come in the hypochondriac category, unfortunately.
But you can see what I'm saying about the dangers of AI being used in these circumstances.
There's going to be a very small minority of the population that will fall under that. So, like, it's an edge case, I think.
So I think one of the things is these scenarios are always a very small minority of the population, Sarah. But folk round this table, GPs will tell you that that small minority of folk often take up a huge amount of time.
I think the point with the clinician, when I spoke to him, and I got told off for calling him a doctor because he was a mister, so I told him he should call me professor, but that's a separate chat. So when I showed him what I had done, he said my admin could have done that.
Yeah.
And so I think the point I was trying to make was that by adopting these tools, his admin could have actually taken that 12 pages of gobbledygook.
Sure, and I get that, and I think that kind of scenario is immense, and we could all learn from that because we all get documentation, whether it be from health services or others, where sometimes you think, why have we got all of this, when it could have been simplified and made it much easier to understand. But, you know, it is the devil's advocate position of AI being used by certain folks, and it will be, as Sarah rightly says, a minority, but a very vocal and often time-consuming minority. You know, how do we get over that?
It is worth going back to that earlier point about benefits and disbenefits. Of course, we know from our experience, both in the National Health Service UK-wide and going back to that NatureScott example, AI is a brilliant tool to help you triage cases that come in. And it helps you identify unusual patterns in an extremely effective way, and it helps you route cases in an extremely effective way. It's one of the biggest productivity gains we see with our clients. So the risk you point out is real, but again, why can't we use AI to be more efficient at triaging? Actually, this looks a little bit unusual. This looks as though it might have been AI generated. The recruitment industry is full of that at the moment because we're awash with CVs and applications. We're awash with CVs and applications that are AI generated. Everyone's using AI tools to sift those out. It would be the same in a GP surgery in the future, I think.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Potentially a lot better than what currently exists. So if you look at the NHS symptom checkers, they're not bespoke, they're not individualised, they're not taking context from that individual. With AI, you can now add all of that in, so these hypochondriacs could get as much attention as they like.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin. And I'd like to bring in Stephen Kerr.
Yeah, I saw yesterday the ONS had said that public sector productivity had gone backwards at a faster rate than for many years. So I am really interested. In fact, I was a little shocked, Sarah, to hear you say what you said. You won't have anything to do with the public sector because of the lack of velocity. So go on, sorry.
Don't actively seek. It's too hard a procurement process, too long, too low costs, too. There are many negatives with it versus private sector right now.
And yet, if we go back to Rachel Reeves's speech yesterday morning in 11 Downing Street, our national productivity is now at a crisis level, and a big slug of the drag on our national productivity is the public sector. So I was really interested in what Peter was saying about the NHS. What are the barriers? What are the actual barriers that we as politicians need to actively remove in order to create some velocity around these issues, given the productivity crisis that we have and the great public need that is currently going unanswered? Maybe Peter, you started down this, and I think the convener said we weren't going to go down this particular rabbit hole, but I feel it's absolutely crucial to this whole issue.
Yeah. this is a society discussion, I think, rather than a technology discussion. You know, I certainly think how I had to work in the early parts of my career, you know, climbing the greasy pole inside Microsoft. You know, we worked like crazy. I mean, I used to sleep in my office regularly in Seattle because I didn't have time to go home and have a shower and come back again. So I think there's that side of things. I think, and I'm going to be careful how I say this, but I do think working from home has had a huge impact on productivity in the country. And I look at my company, the people who are building the products in my company have self-selected to pretty much come in every day into the office. We've mandated 2 days a week, but those people are coming in. You know, the most highly trained people in my company come in every single day, because I've not found any piece of technology yet that replaces a whiteboard and a pen and a load of people standing around about it discussing something, and you actually get to sense how people are feeling as part of that conversation, right? And I've worked in the biggest tech companies in the world, right? So a pen and a piece of paper is still one of the kind of biggest thing for innovation. So I think there's a society thing there that I think, you know, the connectedness of people within the organisations, I think that's really, really important. Teams doesn't replace that relationship, that trust, that. So I think there's something there, and AI is not going to fix that. So I think it's a bigger question than just saying, oh, AI can actually increase productivity. I don't know how much you guys work remote or together, but I think you guys work together quite a lot, from what I know. And I think there is a part there that actually getting a bunch of brains that trust each other around the room with a pen and a piece of paper, you know, is probably one of the things that will really increase productivity.
That's almost a symptom, isn't it? I mean, there's a deeper diagnosis here.
Yeah.
I mean, so I'd like us to talk. I'd like us to get to some of the real issues that are going to hold us back as a country, because they are currently holding us back.
Yeah.
So what are they? What are the root issues that we need to deal with from a political point of view in order to facilitate the velocity that we need, not just in the private sector, where some things are happening, but crucially in the public sector that supports the private sector?
I mean, I think having been, and our company being on the front line of public sector transformation and seeing some of the challenges of that, I mean, I'd maybe point to sort of four main things that we see make a huge difference. First of all, you've got to invest in overcoming and tackling your legacy systems, the legacy data platforms and the legacy skills, and allow and invest in new platforms that can more easily talk to one another. We've mentioned data lake technology as well. So a series of technologies and architectures that make it easier for government to act in a more joined up, productive way. So it's investment in new technology. There's clearly skills within the workforce. That's not just about technical skills, but it's about operational skills and people rethinking their work, rethinking whole operating models. When, you know, businesses like ours that are, if you like, cloud native, AI native, we've built our entire operating model around technology. Often we introduce technology into the public sector and they're still working with a legacy operating model. So there's a skills journey there for people to understand how the operating model is going to change and their job's going to change. The third element of that is to make that happen, it's about leadership. And that's about leadership. That can be about political leadership. It can be about leadership in the public sector. Leaders understanding how this will change how we will work. There are many great leaders now, I think, across the public sector in Scotland and in UK-wide that really get digital and AI, but I still think not enough. And if you want to transform and get the benefits of AI and productivity, then you've got to have the leadership awareness and knowledge about how to get to that.
Are you talking about within the civil service?
Within the civil service, yes.
But they need to be enabled by political leaders.
Exactly that, which brings me, I suppose, to my fourth point, is talking about sort of political air cover, if you like, and leadership air cover. You've got to create a culture of innovation. You've got to create a culture of innovation and a culture of partnership. We do things, any company does things that don't always work, but we learn very quickly and we change and we adapt and we move on very fast. The faster we can do that, the better we are, the more competitive we are, the more productive we are. There are still real issues about the culture of innovation across... And
is that rooted in the risk aversion we heard about earlier?
Absolutely, and that's not unique to Scotland.
Because Sarah suggested in one of her replies that the whole concept of what I'm interpreting. Forgive me. But the idea of transparency and accountability was something that slowed up innovation in the public sector. That people were afraid to take bold decisions because of transparency and accountability, that they might end up in front of a committee.
I don't think it has to be I don't think that has to be an either or. You can have transparency and accountability with innovation, but you need to understand that when you're innovating, you don't always know every element of what's going to be delivered in the end, and there may be some setbacks along the way.
Yeah.
What's most important is that you create an environment where it's safe to learn quickly, adapt quickly, and move on. And that environment and that culture is not always present in any nation's civil service.
Well, give us an example of a country where they have that mentality. Estonia was mentioned earlier. That might be a good one.
Singapore.
Singapore. We work in ASEAN. I think Singapore's... Yeah. Sorry, did you want to?
No.
Singapore is a great example of that. I think, just to bring it back, actually, it exists here in pockets, but it's in pockets. It tends to be where there are teams that are particularly well led, where there's a lot of time being spent understanding what an innovation culture means in practice, and then it works. And I went back to the example earlier. We had great results at Nature, Scott. We've been working recently UK-wide with the healthcare regulator MHRA. We've introduced AI into their workflows around clinical trials. Now, we've reduced the time it takes to run a clinical trials application process from 90 days to 41 days. And the chief exec of MHRA was on the Today programme about 2 weeks ago. I mean, that's an incredible productivity gain. The interesting thing about that success story is when we first started working with them, there was a lot of scepticism, actually, from some of the experts in there about AI myths and things like that. The trick to it was showing them how AI could make a difference and iterating with them and learning as we went and encouraging them to be innovative, but also a discipline about the value that was created. If we put in an intervention that didn't create value, we stopped doing it. If we put something in that worked and it worked with them in their workplace, then we doubled down on that and we rolled that out into live. And it's techniques like that that create then such huge efficiency gains in what's a national and very complex service.
So this is leadership and culture. Sorry,
I
Peter.
think one of the problems as well is your kind of single-year budget cycles. You need multi-year budget cycles for these things, right? So, I'm working with people and they're coming to me going, May, June time after April, saying, we don't know what our budget is yet for this year. And then you get 6 months in, and then it's like, I don't know what I'm going to have next year, right? So if you're doing things that are really strategic, like go back to a data lake, right? That is a multi-year project, right? So you need to break away from these individual year budget cycles where it's like, this is a 5-year change programme, begin with the end in mind, work in an agile way, and have a pretty flexible but well-defined project plan. And have the money ring fence for that and say, we're taking 30% of that away next year and we're going to put it over there. To fix this, you need to get multi-year budget cycles sorted out instead of year by year by year.
And clear priorities.
Yeah.
So that is about. So we're talking about leadership, we're talking about culture,
Yeah.
but underpinning all of this is undoubtedly education.
Yes, absolutely.
Right, so one of the biggest threats to our economy is our education system.
Yeah.
Are we in a position as a country currently, in terms of our people, our skill sets, to be able to take the fullest possible advantage? I mean, what's your assessment? What do we have to do differently?
One of the things the best thing I've ever done in my career is actually the apprenticeship programme that I've put in place in my company. We've put 20 odd kids, mainly from council estates, through university, and we've forged a relationship from FE to HE into the workplace. So we just had 3 kids last week. One of them got first-class honours in their second language. So, we've 3/4 of our students have had a first-class honours. They work with us 4 days a week. They go to university 1 day a week. We've got relationships with the university, and every single one of them has a job just now. Of all the 30, I think we've done, and they're all thriving. And all of them came from poorer backgrounds, right? So it can be done. If you look at the sickness levels of our apprentices, it's through the floor. They're never off sick because they're too busy to be ill, and they don't have any anxiety because they don't have enough time on their hands to be anxious, right? So, it's like, and they're doing industry qualifications at the same time as their degree. So we have relationships with the colleges. We hire them with an HND. They join us into third year at university. We pay them a very good above the living wage
So
number.
are you basically saying more undergraduate degree level apprenticeships?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, because if you think about it, every single one of them gets a job when they finish with us. You know, there's real unemployment just now in full-time graduates. So all of them will get jobs. They've got 2 years work experience. They've got an HND. They've got a degree. Most of them from my company are first. You know, 2 years work experience and paid. They don't have student loans or debt to kind of, you know, go against affordability for mortgages and buying their own houses. Most of my apprentices buy a house as soon as they actually graduate. A lot of people can't do that. It's that kind of society thing we need to look at again.
So would it fit if we redesigned our vision of FE and HE more around the idea of...
With industry. You need industry as well.
Say a bit more about that.
Well, you need to start forging and helping companies like mine to be incentivized, not incentivized, because I'm incentivized by the fact that they're productive the day they land because they've already got an HND. But you need industry to actually realise and educate them. And I've done a pretty good job with a lot of companies that it's not a cost to them, it's a benefit to them. So, you know, I've been really pushing hard companies to take on apprentices. So you need a kind of relationship between the colleges, the universities and the employers, and actually educate the employers that this is a benefit to them and not a cost. I love my apprentices, right, because they're all brave and they bring fresh thinking. So the example I gave about taking that 10-week process out of that 10 weeks out of a 12-week process, that was one of the students for their 4th year dissertation. They actually designed that solution as part of their degree, you know, which was incredible. You know, so it's bringing that bravery into organisations and actually fostering that young thinking.
This is
changing the topic.
Other people want to talk about this, but I also want to talk about what's happening in our schools.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, as part of our commitment to particularly our public sector clients in Scotland, then we add a lot of social value activities into all of our contracts. We've always done that over 30 years. One of the great initiatives we've begun working on recently with Scotland is called the Digital Critical Friend, and we're putting some of our experts into mentoring relationships with teachers in Scottish schools to help them talk with more confidence about AI and digital matters. So that's a great initiative. We do placement students, we do apprentices as well as similar to Peter. But you're left with the feeling that it needs to be, these are all initiatives that are being sort of almost bolted on. There's the core of a curriculum and the core of what's going on in primary schools through secondary schools before we reach further education that needs to be looked at to make sure that that's creating a digitally enabled workforce from the moment that they enter primary school all the way through, and it doesn't just start when
What kind of initiatives are we talking about in primary schools?
Well, then I think, you know, if you look back on that Digital Critical Friend, then it is through teacher training, giving them the confidence and then the awareness and skills to bring more digital skills into the classroom from an earlier stage, and that comes back to how we're training our teachers.
We also need to educate education on what tech is, because everyone just thinks that, you know, IT is a bunch of hoodies, you know, sitting at 3 o'clock in the morning with Red Bull coding, and that's not what it is, right? So if you think about, you know, the kind of, and please don't shoot me if this is the wrong term, right? But I just say girls and boys, right? Let me just be basic, right? We can say A and B or whatever you want, but girls and boys. In my company, the majority of developers are boys. And we cannot get CVs for girls because they're just not interested, right? They don't want to be developers. I don't know why. But if you look at the project managers, the scrum leads, the business analysts, you know, the more communicative type and actually often higher paid jobs, so the person that runs delivery for me is a girl. The person who runs product for me with regards to business analyst is a girl. You know, all the project managers are girls, right? So we need to educate. So if you think about taking a product from ideation to commercialization, you know, you've got the product definition, right, which is communicative, product architecture, communicative, the build and test, right, that's techie, the pre-production, a lot of communicative, and service delivery, service management, a lot of communicative, right? So if you think about the skills within tech, of all of that 5-tier stack, only one of them is techie. The rest of it is very much business analysts. So we need to educate the country what tech really is.
Yeah.
Because there's lots of roles, and actually when it comes in the bit that's actually going to get commoditised through AI is the coding bit.
Massive subject. Have I got time for one more question?
If it's brief.
I want to bring Sarah in because of what you said earlier about tooling and about data and basically about intellectual property. Because you're saying your data is your sovereign property.
Yeah. That's what I believe.
Yeah, I understand that from a business point of view. I think I understand that. But I've got a concern then that relates to this, because the adoption of AI in SMEs is probably going to be open source based. The idea of creating a bespoke or customised tool is going to create barriers for
sure.
the use of AI. Can you just say a bit more about
it? We set out on this 18, 20 months ago, and honestly for us it was about adopting the tools. It was more important to start working with the tools so that our team could learn than anything else. And the obvious thing at the time was like, oh, well, we'll build our, rather than paying another software as a service company for our research platform, we'll recreate that and we'll do it with vibe coding and blah, blah, blah. In hindsight, that maybe wasn't, we wouldn't necessarily make the same decision again if we were starting out, but the amount that we have learned and the skills and the ways of working that are now within the team that we're able to now put into our consulting services, we never would have got that from hypothetically going on training courses, or you have to work with the tools.
But that's probably going to be more viable.
Yeah.
The training courses and the package solutions, off-the-shelf solutions.
Yeah, but which is absolutely fine, because you're still having to adopt them and put them into your workflows and start figuring out how does it live within my SME
This is the innovative mindset.
Yes, exactly. And the point about leadership, I think that for me, the other massive learning is that if the teachers are leading the training or the politicians are leading the civil servants, you all need to be using the tools. Like, you can't talk theoretically about it. How are you disrupting yourselves? Because like there's two disruptions going on here. There's the industry disruptions, the societal disruptions, but there is every single one of you should be disrupting yourselves. How can you be 10xing or 5xing or 3xing what you do in your current role and demonstrating that on a daily basis? I think that's the biggest learning that we had as leaders.
And our challenge is that as much as we have ambition, and we're good at talking about this, the politicians in particular, the AI Scotland programme for 2025, £1 million to enable SMEs.
Nothing.
It's,
nothing.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and then also even access, like probably haven't got your agreed, here are the tools that you can access Claude or you can access OpenAI and you can link it up to your personal data. All those things need to be unblocked. So to your point about what should we be unblocking, absolutely those fundamentals for me.
And certainly more than £1 million.
Oh yeah.
Well, Microsoft's budget this year is 80 billion.
Yeah.
80 billion.
Yeah.
It's the biggest. Like, for me, it's the biggest risk not to start adopting it just now. Like it's much more risky to not adopt it than to adopt it. And therefore, the money and the decisions should be going towards enabling that, because that is the future.
Yeah, it's critical. It's a critical risk to the future of the economy, isn't it? Not doing anything, not an option.
Well, not doing anything, you're basically saying we're not going to be that relevant, and I don't know.
None of us will be able to compete if we're not AI businesses.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. And that must operate at a national level as well.
I sit with Copilot beside me in every meeting now, right? So if I'm talking about any topic or people are telling me stuff, I'm researching in real time during the meeting.
Yeah.
So I know the facts while in real time. And that every single person around that room can start doing that. Right?
Yeah.
So you can be fact-checking things like, is it right that it's 300 megawatts per, hours for a data centre? Right? I might be wrong. Right? I don't think I am, but it's that kind of, it's that kind of thing you should be doing.
Well, I have to hand back to convener, otherwise I'll be getting switched off. So,
don't tempt us, Mr. Kerr. Can I bring in Gordon MacDonald?
Thanks very much, convener. Good morning, panel. And just to reassure you, every question I'm going to ask you came from ChatGPT. So the only thing I would say is I genuinely sat yesterday and asked what questions I should be asking you guys, and every single model gave me different answers. So my question is going to be about governance. So we've got the vast majority of our companies are SMEs with less than 50 employees. If they've got an IT department, it's only a couple of folk. So they're going to be very much dependent on third-party software and any AI engines we talked about earlier on that are running some of the expenses or whatever it is, or planning in the background. So we have to get it right so that they make informed decisions and it improves productivity, which we've been talking about. So how are AI systems tested, validated and monitored for safety?
I'll jump in on this one. There are like the source models, so OpenAI, Anthropic, Grok, Gemini. Of all the ones that we've worked with for regulated industries, we tend to go with Claude because the safety, if you look at the reports, they all publish against different standards the safety of the responses, and Claude is by far and away, I think, holding itself to a much higher ethical standard, which is really, really important in regulated industries.
It's also, you've got to remember that these solutions should never be the final decision-making point in the workflow, right? This is a tool that's part of, think about a kind of, just let's take law, so Mr. Fraser can appreciate this. A young lawyer comes in, you chuck him all the kind of tasks, the kind of easy tasks and stuff. That doesn't go out the door until it goes past a partner, right? It's exactly the same with this world, right? This is, this is a start for 10. It's the 80-20 rule. It does the kind of 80% of easy stuff, and then you probably spend 50% of your time looking at that 20% and making sure it's right. So the efficiencies aren't, 80% efficiency. You get a 30% gain because there's a bit more overhead there to actually make sure everything's right, and you've got to check everything. I did a thing recently because I was actually doing a demonstration on this very point where it says draw me a picture of the UK, and Cardiff was sitting in Ireland. It doesn't. It got the shape right, and most of it was right, but just some of the some of it was wrong. But it wouldn't take very. It did a lot quicker than if I was to draw a map, and then to tidy it up was quicker. So you've got to make sure that you never let it be the decision-making point. You can't just chuck something out the door.
Yeah. And also on that, I think the way that you use it, so if teams actually collaborate first and get some sense of ideas and then go to the tools, you tend to get much higher quality output. Yeah. So if you've done some independent thinking and then you're saying, I'm considering asking these questions, and then you use the tool to say, what am I missing? What are the gaps? What might be a more challenging question than I've thought about here, or all my questions following the same theme? You get much better responses back, but also your brain engages much more with what's being said. So, it's better all round versus when people go straight in and just say, tell me blah, like your brain doesn't engage in the same way.
And this is generative AI, right?
This is generative.
Right, so there's agentic AI, in agentic AI, you're actually programming the agents and you're telling it what to do. And getting back to whatever you put in is what you get out. So it's all about making sure what you put in is right in the agentic.
And that points, I think there's two things to your question. First of all, then that points to the need to have quality frameworks, quality, trust and ethics frameworks that are defined and promoting that to SMEs as much as to large business and the use of AI in government. So we developed an AI charter of principles. We've got an AI policy about how we'll use it. And I mentioned earlier, we're just going through ISO 42000 at the moment for the use of AI, both in our company, but also we're going through that ISO standard for how we deploy AI and how we build models for our clients as well. And that gives us a very, very useful quality framework, a very disciplined quality framework to follow. That needs to be backed up by audit. But then maybe the second point is what do you do once you've found out that you do have ethical, safety, quality risks? And that brings us back to how do we handle innovation? Often we over-regulate when we don't understand something. And it comes back to skills, it comes back to awareness. We need to create environments where people understand the trust and quality frameworks that they're using AI within. And then when they discover something that is off-piste, that is, Cardiff is in the North Sea, and goodness knows what will happen, an equivalent in a clinical environment, then how do we respond to that? How do we respond to that and change the way that we use AI and build the models? A lot of what we've spoken about today is around large language models and research using Copilot and things like that. Our core business is building quite bespoke machine learning and predictive analytical models often. And that has a lot more complexity in it. And we learn all the time about how good those predictions are and what the quality of that prediction is. Because if that's underpinning a degree of automation and a degree of decision support, you really do need to know where you are in terms of how that model has been built, how it's trained, and whether it's performing well in different outlier conditions, if you like. So that's where trust, safety and quality frameworks become absolutely key. And I think, you know, many SMEs, they would see, say, going through something like an ISO standard, potentially as an investment and potentially as a burden, but also those that have gone through that kind of discipline also point to the fact that it strengthens them as a company. And I think we should be encouraging that as well through our AI strategy and the action plan for SMEs.
Should there be a role for government? I mean, you've talked about having trust, safety and quality frameworks, but you want everybody to be working to the same standard. So given that AI has been around for 30 years, what legislation is in place that governs AI? And should we have a regulator, like we've got, I'm not saying how effective they are, but we've got a regulator for Ofcom and Ofgem. Should there be a regulator that covers AI?
You've got a number of different legislative tools that point to sort of quality. There's different dimensions here around data and security, GDPR and others. I think you can look at, on the international picture of different countries, how they've approached regulating AI. Obviously, the EU has taken an extremely sort of thorough, risk-conscious approach. Maybe we could put it like that. The US has taken, on the other extreme, has taken a very sort of innovation-based. That's possibly a political decision about where do we want to sit as a nation on this sort of ethical innovation scale, if you like. The challenge for regulation is coming back to it. It's hard to regulate things you don't understand. Yeah. And again, keeps coming back to skills and capability and awareness. But perhaps the wise approach is to just to right-size the regulation, thinking carefully about the innovation we want to generate. If this economy is going to be an AI economy in 5 to 10 years' time, it can't be held back by too much regulation. If we have a lower amount of regulation, then some things might happen that we'd have rather avoided. But it's then how you respond to that innovation culture. It's how you respond to that and how you correct things and keep moving forwards. They, I think, are the economies that will make the greatest gains, even with a disciplined regulatory framework.
So given that we've said that AI has the potential to improve productivity and make businesses more efficient, which is in other words for either not employing more people or reducing your headcount, what policies are needed to support that workforce transition, and is that not a role for government?
I might challenge maybe the premise of that. If you want to become an AI-enabled economy and an AI-enabled business, then it's about growth. We're not cutting staff. We're growing because we're more competitive, we're more efficient, we're growing and employing more staff here in Scotland, more staff across the UK in higher value jobs. There is, though, a workforce transformation point. You're absolutely right, and there is a role of government there, and I think that's about communication and education in the workforce to help the workforce understand the benefits of AI in their careers, but also to give support on retraining, upskilling into higher value careers that are based on AI. Government must have a role in investing in that reskilling and retraining and upskilling.
I think what's important here as well is, this is not about competing with our neighbour in the next street. This is about making Scotland a player in the global market. If you look at Estonia and how Estonia has become so successful, Estonia's philosophy is, Estonia is a place to do business, not the market. So we should be thinking the same way, right, in Scotland. So by making Scottish companies or British companies more efficient, we can go and compete into the world markets with the tools that we've got here. And I think that's the thing that Scotland should actually be thinking about as a government and focus on how to replicate the success of companies like Estonia and becoming a great kind of export. If you look at kind of merchants in Glasgow and stuff, the foundation of Glasgow is all on export. And I think that's what we should be doing as well as a nation, is making our companies really, really efficient here so that we can go and compete in global markets. So if you think about it, I think the average graduate just now coming out of university in the west coast of America is about $150,000 to $175,000 a year salary, starting straight from university. Right, very, very expensive. So if you think about startups and scale-ups on the west coast now, it's very expensive for them to actually start their businesses because of the cost of staff. So people that build global tools here and global solutions to go and compete in these marketplaces. If you look at our company, we've raised £9 million so far to build our solution, and all the other companies that are based in the west coast of America that we're competing against, the other one that's the next most that's raised is 150 million, right? Because they need that level of investment to actually, kind of feed their business because it's so expensive to do. So there's a yin and a yang here, right? We've got a great opportunity, because we're relatively low cost. The cost of property is relatively inexpensive. The cost of staff is relatively inexpensive compared to some of the other world markets. We can actually be very innovative if we use the technology properly.
Okay, I'll leave it at that. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Gordon. I'd like to bring in Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Convener. A lot of what I was going to ask has already been covered, so I'm not going to go over old ground, but I just want to pick up on Gordon MacDonald's last point about reskilling people. And just to contextualise this, Scotland's had a lot of people in the economy in the last 20 years working in call centres. So I look, for example, at my energy supplier. 10 years ago, if I wanted to speak to my energy supplier, I would pick up the phone and I'd speak to somebody in a call centre. Now, everything's on the app. And if I'm speaking to something, it's probably a computer, not a human being, because it's all done through chat. So are we going to see the death of the call centre jobs because they're all being replaced by AI? And if we are, what's going to happen to those people who have those jobs?
Very good questions. I would say yes, we're likely. I think call centres and the call centre jobs, the majority of them, are likely to be ones that go by 2030. Yep. So given that we've got so many people in Scotland employed in those roles, because there's a lot of FS back office, there needs to be a bit of an offboarding plan. So what could the government be doing? Well, organisations could start reporting on how many jobs they can identify that will by 2030 not be there. They can be reporting on the reskilling of the number of those jobs that they will reskill and redeploy into their businesses. You could be encouraging organisations to create little funds that allow for a longer, a better severance package, so that maybe the AI transition is a little bit like COVID. It's very unusual. It's going to hit every single sector in quite significant ways. So what responses can we have as businesses to help those individuals that are going to be out of a job? I mean, the Bank of New York, they've now created HR codes for the agents that they've created. So the agents that will be in the call centre are on the HR system. So yes, that transition is already happening and it will be hitting Scotland.
But you've got the other side of things as well. You've got in the press just now the defence sector's flying just now. Obviously, we've got Rosyth Dockyard. We've got, we're creating ships. We're built. Back to some of the more basic things we're doing. I think, I live in Fife, so I see, some of the kind of, what's happened there. There's 300 Malaysian welders just now being imported into Scotland to actually satisfy the demand. So going back to the kind of whole FE, industry type thing, we should be producing welders, through colleges and apprenticeships just now to satisfy that demand. Because, I think there's a big struggle now with, with the change with us leaving Europe. It's very difficult to get, if I was starting again, I'd be thinking about being an electrician, because you can't get an electrician, you can't get a plumber, you can't get a joiner, you can't get a none of that stuff's going to get replaced by AI. So maybe we should be thinking about going back to 1969 and the apprenticeships that we had with some of those jobs, because, fine, it's okay to have a services industry, and as a foundation, but as a services industry creates prosperity, people want better houses, they want nicer cars, they want bigger this, they want bigger that. So therefore, we've got to supply that demand through some of the basic services through, traditional apprenticeships and tradesmen.
Yeah. I was at Babcock on Friday,
Right,
actually, on a
right.
visit, and absolutely flying as a company,
Yeah.
and struggling to fill vacancies, which is
Yeah.
great. But going back to my colleague Stephen Kerr's questioning, do you think our whole education training setup in the country is fleet of foot enough to keep up with these changes in the economy? Anybody?
No.
I hear from at home. So I think we've got bigger problems in education to tackle, which has nothing to do with this. Which is, I think, the behavioural issues just now in education is pretty prevalent in the news just now, and I think we've lost control of the classrooms as a nation from the assaults and things that's taken place on teachers. So I think going back to basics, I think what we need to do is go back to a bit of inspiration, aspiration, engage education to create opportunity. So if we start to kind of think of those four things, we should be inspiring the nation to have an aspiration, to look after yourself, to create wealth for yourself, to embrace education. And if you embrace education, you'll create opportunity. So I think there's a lot bigger discussion to be had here than this panel.
That's very interesting, but we could go down that rabbit hole, and
I don't want to go there. But
that would be a different conversation.
But I think so. Going to schooling, I think the most important thing is we need to be teaching people to be curious, and I think curiosity is the most important thing, because if you're curious, then you go and learn, and if you learn, then you can adapt, and you're going to have to. So if I think about my career, when I was at school, I did not have a clue that jobs existed that I ended up getting inside. I did not know there were big global companies that you could work for. I did not know that the salaries that I was getting paid when I was working inside these organisations were actually available to people like us. So that's because I was brought up in Abbeyview and Dunfermline, so I went to Woodmill High School. So in those days, you didn't have that aspiration. So how do we start to give the aspiration to kids in council estates? Because I think, there's a kind of lost generation sitting in council estates just now that we should start to be given inspiration and aspiration to. I know that's a very separate discussion onto this topic, so sorry.
No, interesting.
I would just add to that. I think the point that was made earlier on about coding skills and sometimes a bit of an obsession about this. There are apprenticeships and there are qualifications that need to be very specific to particular technologies. But really what we're talking about is trying to develop problem-solving skills. So as a company, our whole business is building large data and AI infrastructures. Probably we employ a third of our intake, our graduate or placement intake, is from computer science background. The others can be from an arts background, a humanities background, but they're great problem solvers and they display the curiosity that Peter has mentioned. So how do we encourage that through the education system? I think it's very easy to have quite a simplistic, we've got to start training everyone in Java and things like that. No one's going to be coding in Java. The number of people coding in Java is going to be going down and down, and the AI will be doing it. But it's about thinking, curiosity, design, and problem-solving skills. They're what we need to be developing.
Mm-hmm. Great. Sarah's a great example of this, right? Because your company, we use Sarah's services. Getting the user experience right and the interaction between the human and the interface and the machine, that's the hardest thing to fill. And, all of us struggle to fill those roles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, critical thinking.
Yeah.
Okay. And on the education point, I think that one thing that all institutions could be doing right now is embedding the tools in the curriculum so that the students, whether it's higher education or the secondary education, are coming out with maybe agents that they've built that help them to be productive. So I can see a future where, if I went for a job, the company isn't just hiring me, they're hiring me and my stack of tools, agents, that help me to be much more productive and have a specialist knowledge on something. And there's some amazing examples. Wharton University, Ethan Mollick is worth looking at. He started this 2-3 years ago, teaching his MBA students with the tools. And there's no reason. I had the conversation with Glasgow University and they were like, no, we couldn't copy that because we haven't agreed as a organisation which tools we're going to have, and we couldn't put it into the curriculum because of cheating, and it's just barrier after barrier after barrier. And we already have a path of where it's worked previously. Let's copy it. Let's steal with pride. Mm-hmm.
It's often said that AI won't take your job, but someone that's good at using AI will.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of truth in that, and that should be fed into the sort of education policy as well.
Yeah.
Great. You've given us a lot to think about. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. I'd now like to bring in Willie Coffey.
Thanks very much, Convener. What a fantastic conversation we're having this morning. As an old computer scientist, software designer from the 1970s that did encounter AI at Strathclyde in those days and wondered what the future would hold, I suppose it's with a mixture of wonderment, amazement, but horror as well, at what is unfolding. I just wanted to touch base with you and get your views on the ethical side of all of this, and whether there indeed is any ethical dimension to AI whatsoever. There are loads of examples you've given today. Peter, you are giving us a few examples, but one of the more recent ones that I see on things like Facebook, which about 3 billion people on the planet use, is that as soon as you do something, you're bombarded forever, aren't you? If you go downtown to buy a washing machine or something, you don't get hundreds of salesmen coming to your door 5 minutes later, but you do on things like Facebook. And it's a simple example, Convener, perhaps, but it illustrates what's happening here and where there's lack of control or understanding. And it kind of crosses the boundary between support or intrusion. In issues like that, how on earth do we think about and begin to build these kinds of protections for citizens in this rapid development that we're seeing in front of us?
I think we'll learn a lot from the regulated industries. So they're having to address a lot of those questions right now because of consumer duty or any other legislation that they're held account to. And they're looking at frameworks, they're considering things like, if one of our core values is collaboration or inclusion, how does that actually show up in this digital onboarding journey? You know, what does that actually mean? And the problem that most of them have is that they haven't thought about that. They've got nice words, but they haven't thought about what does that actually mean. So they can't then codify it into the algorithm, therefore be confident about the ethics when that outcome is then created. Sorry.
And I was going to say, I mean, it brings us back to having an ethics framework, having a clearly defined ethics framework. That doesn't give you the answer in every situation, but at least it gives you a frame of reference for when, as we learn more about when different examples come up, and you know the Facebook example, and there'll be other examples that make the headline. At least we have a frame of reference to go back to and say, what do we think of this, given what we've said our ethical stance is? And if we think something's unacceptable or something's high risk, then at least we can take an intervention, and it gives us a framework within which we can begin to understand the ethics of how different algorithms work, how different businesses work, and then try to take interventions, some of which might be policy interventions.
I mean, you've got the choice. I don't use it, so I just switched it all off. I don't use social, right? So, you know, you have got that choice. And I think, you know, it's interesting. You know, if you read any of the stuff by Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who, you know, invented the internet, he says quite clearly we should never invented it sometimes because he doesn't know if it's done more good than harm. So I think you've got the ultimate choice whether or not you want to be exposed to that, and you can just switch it off. And I think you're starting to see that, you know, you have all these people that, you know, and I think it's created a lot of anxiety in the youth because they see all these people having a great life and they're having this great fun, and actually 95% of it's fake and nonsense, you know. So I think there's a reset coming when it comes to this kind of stuff. I think, you know, our generation around this room, or most of us anyway, you know, we had proper friends, you know, where we actually got a ball and went and played in the street. And this is getting back to the basics in life, you know. And, you know, I'm fortunate enough to still have friends I had when I went to school. And I think that's what's important, is this kind of fake artificial life, this self-gratification, this instant gratification, this, you know, instant kind of hit. I think you realise that it's actually, you know, not a good thing for society as a whole. And I think, you know, maybe going back to some more basics, I think we've covered this a couple of times, you know, it's not a bad thing in life. I think things have happened too quickly with digital, so therefore people haven't kept a pace with it as a nation and a society.
Yeah. Without getting into a generational, which is a thing, and I'm sure other committees, but you know, I've got a 14-year-old and an 18-year-old. They, you know, people talk about being sort of digital or social media native, but they just ignore it. I think, they ignore what they don't believe. They know I think they know who their friends are. I think they know the services that they use, and they've got an awareness of the dangers. And so I think we sometimes underestimate the ability of the younger generations actually to sort of self-police this. I'm not saying there are real risks and terrible stories of the risks from social media, but I do think I have a lot of faith in future generations being able to work that through and create the type of ethical frameworks. And as Peter said, make their own choices about how they use technology, maybe more than we think they will do.
Yeah, I mean, the whole fakery agenda is quite real. I mean, there's some incredibly amazing and good things out there, but there's some really dangerous stuff going on as well. Yeah. And Peter was talking in a light-hearted way about talking to himself and that Teams call, and that AI bot was faked to be him, and there's a much more sinister application of that kind of thing as possible. But I was trying to get to the heart of the AI tools themselves. Is it impossible to build in any conscience within AI software and models, or is it something we just have to oversee when we see it working in practice and take some steps to try and moderate or protect people in that way?
You can always build in constraints to how any software solution behaves. Tracking AI, how AI software solutions behave, those is more challenging due to their nature. So inevitably, you're going to have frameworks that look at the consequences as much as what the inputs were and how algorithms were designed and built. But you must have frameworks that look at the impact, because it can be difficult to predict.
Yeah. Also, you can limit. There's something called the lethal trifecta. So if an agent, you can limit the access that the LLM or the agent or the AI has access to. So you don't want them to have all three of these tools. So one would be access to external information, to access to an individual's personal information, like within a company, and 3, it's gone right out of my head, Seth.
Can I say something? I was going to go back to your point as well. One of the things that I think government really needs to think hard about is the criminality as well. Where's the crime actually taking place, right? So if we're sitting in our house in Scotland and somebody raids our bank account sitting from, I'll be careful, let's go neutral, let's say Iceland, right, rather than the normal places we point fingers at. So if somebody's sitting in Iceland rinsing our bank accounts, where's the crime actually taking place? Is it taking place in the UK, where we are getting our bank account emptied, or is it taking place in Iceland? And so how do we get the Scottish police force or the British police force to actually engage with us while the criminal's sitting in Iceland? I would imagine the Icelandic police probably don't really care about somebody nicking bank accounts in the UK, because they're more worried about people, kind of doing criminality in their local shores. And that's something when it comes to this world, with AI and fraud. UK had 1.7 billion of fraud last year, through tech. Most of it came through social and tech. The banks in the UK are very quick to pay out, which some people think is a good thing. But if you look at the Germans, they don't. So therefore people take much more responsibility. So basically, if you think about it, you get your house robbed because you left your door unlocked and you get compensated for that. Well, actually, if you don't get compensated for that, you probably make sure you lock your door better. So there's a big discussion, to be had here for government as well around about the criminality, and AI is making it worse. Because if you look at the way that people can use AI agents to actually find out about somebody and impersonate them and actually pick up, start to kind of harvest things like the passwords, etc., then that is a real problem in society just now when it comes to AI. So this is something that needs to be thought of at a governmental level. It's round about criminality, around about AI, and criminality around about location. So it's not this is not on the topic, but it is something that could stifle AI, is actually the criminality around about it.
Sure. Thanks very much for that. Just my final query, I suppose, is how do we ever get to a point where the citizen can shape these tools? My experience is they do things to you. They do things for you, but they do a lot of things to you, whether you like it or not, and that simple example of Facebook bombarding you with adverts and so on that you might not like. How do we ever get to a position where the decent, honest citizen can participate in what these models actually do in the future? And that's about building that ethical framework into the mix somehow. But how on earth do you get that to be replicated within the tools that are going to be let loose on us in the next 5, 10, 20 years? How do we make sure that that's an element, a key element in the design of these systems for the future?
Well, I mean, well, there are now pretty mature techniques that can be used to make sure that the AI services that are built are user-centred, and it's a lot of what our business does. I know it's a lot of what Sarah's business does as well. So, putting the user first, understanding exactly what they need and how to deliver on that, and that's a lot of what's good about modern government digital systems, is that they have that user research and service design thinking built into them. The question arises, though, as a sort of private sector player, is how much do you do that research? How much do you create a service that is dedicated to the citizen or the user? I think my cautiously optimistic view on that is if you've got a competitive service out there that you're offering to consumers, it had better work for them and get a good reputation for working for them. So, those acting in good faith in the marketplace will design systems that work for citizens, that work for users, and they will come to dominate. We're going to go through a period, though, of good and bad AI that'll just have to shake out at some point.
Sarah, how do we?
Well, I think until people own their own data and then can set controls with, to what personal companies can do with that data, I think it's very hard to address what you've just said. So in regulated environments, as Seth said, much easier because you're doing the research, you're designing it in a human-centered way, you're baking values in, you're making sure that there's good outcomes. But in the social media where it's optimized for attention and engagement, until the users got control over those elements with the data, what they want to happen, I can't. That would kill off all the social media business models, and they're not going to do that. They're not going to design in a human-centered way because they want your attention.
They want to sell you things.
Yeah, I don't let my kids go anywhere near any of that stuff because I just think it rots your brain. Yeah.
Peter, will AI models ever have an ethical bone in their virtual bodies?
There's bad. I did a talk recently, and I was kind of using it like I said. It's like a shovel, right? You can use it to dig your garden and feed your family, or you can actually use it as a weapon, right? It's the same. It's the same for any tool, right? Every single tool you can think of, you can use it for a good thing or a bad thing, right? So it's not about AI being bad; it's actors being bad, right? And so you can put legislation. So if you think about you as a government, when it comes to data and your information, these companies have always leveraged the fact that law has been all about opting out of something instead of opting in of something, right? So you could force that people had to opt into sharing rather than opting out. And that's one of the areas where legislation takes a long time to catch up. So it's those simple measures that you can take. But, this is a huge discussion topic, actually. I think we need to kind of simplify it because, AI is such a ubiquitous term, and it's kind of, people really don't understand what it means in a lot of cases. And I think what we need to focus on the fact that there are bad actors and good actors, and that the criminality and the negativity and the things that's happening in a bad way around about it, that's still being done by people. And it's people that's doing that behind the scenes. It's not AI that's necessarily doing it. But you can program things to do bad things. But at the end of the day, it's still a person that's programming it to do the bad thing. So you need to start thinking that it's not, the machine is not the bad thing, right? It's not a thing that's going to go and do something bad. It's human actors behind the scenes that enables that to happen. And that's where you need to focus the law, not on the technology.
Okay. Many, many thanks for that. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Willie. And I'd like to bring in Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Convener. And as we've been sitting here, as always, I've been sitting doing a bit of research, which some folk find annoying, and some people think that MSPs shouldn't be on phones and laptops and surfaces while we're in committees or in debate. And yet, you guys have said we should be doing our own research all of the time, and I would agree with that. On your website, Sarah, there's a phrase: millions of people struggle with services that weren't built with them in mind. And some would argue that a lot of services delivered by government, by the public sector, are delivered without people in mind. And you've given some examples today. Seth, you're obviously heavily involved in public sector work. Sarah, you've told us you've avoided it. Peter, you've given us examples of where you think it's wrong, and you've highlighted lack of innovation, risk aversity, single-year budgets, and in some cases over-regulation. I'd like to use one of your examples, Peter, around about your procurement, your NHS procurement, and having to deal with the territorial boards and the other boards too. And one of those boards, of course, is National Services Scotland, which is supposed to help with those procurements. My question is this: could AI be used to make that procurement process better? Could AI be used to get what everybody wants, but instead of that argument taking place during the course of the procurement, all of that is done and dusted before because of the use of AI? Are there opportunities there where we can get much more bangs for our buck, better procurements, and at the end of it, better services for people?
So I don't think it should be allowed to make the final decision.
No.
Right, that's still got to be made by the right, process and committees. But certainly, I think the research can be done a lot faster. The checking of things can be done a lot quicker. The generation of documentation can be done a lot quicker, and the understanding of the proposals that have been put in can be made a lot more efficient through the use of AI.
Grand. Sarah, if that landscape was much easier, would you then consider working with the public sector?
Yeah. I mean, we, just because you mentioned the website there, I was like, I wonder if we redesigned the social disabilities payment a couple of years ago. So that we don't do it is not entirely true. But I think if it was much easier to get through the procurement and to then work on the other side of that procurement, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we do, as I've mentioned, a fair bit of business in UK and Scottish public sector. The procurement process can be a lengthy process, sometimes with good reason, sometimes with a degree of frustration. I think I'd agree with Peter that there's obvious AI tools that could help the administrative side of procurement. But if the outcome for procurement is, the Scottish pound well spent and citizens getting better services, then I think that's also in this new age of technology and data. It's about you creating the right marketplace, attracting the right firms. Startups not enough. Take them to scale up as well. Take them to be real challengers of the existing marketplace. Creating a dynamic marketplace that that people find it, like Sarah's company, like mine, find it easy to sell into government. That's the route to getting better public services to citizens. I believe there are administrative gains that can be made with AI on the way, but I think they'll be dwarfed by having a really healthy, dynamic, AI-enabled marketplace.
Peter rightly made the point that any of the decisions made around about awards of contracts or whatever would have to go through the decision-making process as is. But putting all of this together is often the most difficult thing in terms of a procurement. And again, you talked earlier about the lack of use of RAG ratings in some regards. That's not been my experience in government. Sometimes there have been too much use of RAG ratings, but the emphasis is always the risk aversity and on red. do you think that, again, the use of these tools and the education of those who are building a procurement document could make all of this so much easier for all of us, and almost, you know, ensuring that you get the service delivery right? I'm seeing Sarah nodding.
I just categorically say yes.
Yeah. And nobody is disagreeing with that. So basically your message is that government civil service must make much more use of AI. One of the terms that was used by Murdo Fraser was fleet of foot. You've obviously had a lot of experience with government. Is government fleet of foot enough in terms of taking advantages of this
I think in pockets, I think there's some very good practice here. As I mentioned, we've been on the CivTech Innovation Accelerator twice. That's worked very well for us, actually. And I think that's worked very well for the agencies that we've delivered into under that. That's allowed us to bring our own investment into an AI-enabled product suite that we've not only taken to the Scottish public sector and matched with our own funding that we received from the CivTech programme, but only earlier this year we opened up in Malaysia to serve an ASEAN demand. We already had an Australian company as well to serve demand there. Scotland has such an amazing heritage of innovation, and it does happen here.
Yeah.
It does happen here. We have built platforms at places like Registers of Scotland, with Nature Scotland, and other, that we've then taken to the world. There's one in particular. We digitised. We were the first digital register at Registers of Scotland about 14 years ago. We actually then took that technology to New South Wales Planning in Australia, built on that, invested in that more, brought that back again. So it does happen in pockets, but I still think the overall culture of innovation is not yet there across public sector, and that's not unique to Scotland.
So let's stick with planning, and there was mention of Singapore being at the forefront of use of technology, and in terms of planning, Singapore have used what Peter describes as their data lake to ensure that they've got the right planning for the future, and that's something that we're not at that level yet. Are we making best use of the massive amount of data that we have? Are we using our data lake to the advantage? How can we do that as quickly as the likes of Singapore? What do we need to do?
Well, I mean, Singapore started in 2019, and they're like 6 years ahead now. I think you need to look at what data exists, so know what data exists and what format that data is in, and then figure out how long it's going to take to get it into machine-readable format, for a start. And then look at the use cases. Like, government is massive. If you're going to go after procurement, what are the specific use cases, and measure the difference that it makes once you've redesigned that workflow with AI, and then share that more broadly.
Thank you. Peter?
I think one of the problems in Scotland, we seem to have a problem with going from ideation to commercialisation. Right? That's a chasm we seem to, you know. I'm on Richard Lockheed's Tech Advisory Council, and one of the people there who lives in California said that Scotland's got more of the top universities, you know, per head of capita than anywhere in the world, right? If you think about in that 40 by 40 strip in Scotland, we've got, you know, amazing universities from St Andrews to Glasgow to, you know, what's going on in Dundee with gaming and security, etc. across. We have got the education system here that's world class, but we seem to not be able to take it from, and we get the startups going, but it's that scale up. You know, it's hard to get that scale up, and to get the scale up, it means that we become an export. You've got to export to get the scale up, you know, and we're going through this as a company ourselves, you know. So the thing that Scotland could do, I think, as a government is, and this is away from AI, but we're very good at this kind of stuff, is go from the ideation to the initial seeding into scale. And the way we go to scale as a community and an organisation in a country is through export, like we did in the 1800s. So, you know, what we did in the 1800s to make this country amazing in the 1700s through Enlightenment, we just need to do again, because it's not new, right? And I think that's the bit we struggle with. It's that next stage from, we're great at doing tech, we're great at doing IP, we're great at kind of doing the initial thinking, coming up with great things. We just, as a nation, I don't know what it is, we just seem to, you know, and when I worked in Seattle, there was a group of people called the Microscots, you know, because there was 300 of us all worked in Seattle, you know. You know, we should be trying to keep the talent here instead of having to go abroad to do well. And I think that's something that we need to be thinking about, you know, because all this sorry.
I couldn't agree more about the point on scale-ups. Too often, I think here, and I see it UK-wide as well, companies do well, startups do well, then they start to scale, and sooner or later a large foreign multinational comes along and buys them up. They take them off the playing field. Going back to that dynamic marketplace, how can you have a dynamic marketplace where as soon as a company gets above a parapet, it gets bought by a multinational? It's no longer competitive. It's probably no longer as innovative and as fleet of foot. Governments really need to protect and encourage and invest in their scale-ups and encourage them to export as well, and support and be really intentional about taking companies all the way through, so they are genuine challenges domestically, but then they're challenges on the international market as well. And we don't see enough of that. Our group CEO, if she were here from the Australian experience, she would talk about the experience there anecdotally and say, well, attracting investment is great for this growth journey, but be careful that what you don't attract is just lots of foreign ownership. What we need is investment here that stays here as well and grows jobs here, so that people want to build their careers and stay in Scotland.
In terms,
yesterday we gave everyone bar one, because he joined after we'd sent the letters out, but we gave everybody in the company, in our company, stock options and shares yesterday. Right, every single person, right down to the apprentices, every single person got shares. I had to sit in a town hall for an hour with us explaining what it meant, you know, getting shares and stock options in a company. Whereas if you go to the States, right, everyone wants shares, right? And I was getting questions, what does this mean? Is this a bad thing? Is this, you know, yeah, you know, and it's those entrepreneurship, you know, is something that we need to really, you know, I've been fortunate enough to be the entrepreneur in residence in Strathclyde University for the last 4 years and sit with students and talk them through what it means to start a company and lecture on starting a business. You know, and I think that it's okay, we're very good at teaching the technical aspect of things, you know, so we're very good at chemistry and physics and maths and engineering and all that stuff. But we need to drive more entrepreneurial thinking within those subjects, because entrepreneurship is not a subject in a university, right? Entrepreneurship is a thing and a state of mind. And I think we could get better as a country to promote entrepreneurship within the educational institutions, to start to harness people to think that way moving forward, instead of thinking about getting a job, or I want to be a physician, be a physician or a clinician or a whatever you want to be, an engineer, but be an entrepreneurial engineer, not an engineer.
Grand. My final question, I've probably got hundreds of others, but I know time is precious now. My final question is around about that last scenario of, you know, folk moving elsewhere or businesses being bought up here. And, you know, the fact that the investment that we have, as discussed earlier, being invested by government is pretty low. Do you think we should ensure that, you know, investment that may be put in by Scottish Enterprise, by the Scottish National Investment Bank, in start-up companies, which will hopefully succeed, do you think there should be an element of golden handcuffs there to make sure that that is not eventually bought up from elsewhere, so that we can maintain our own growth, our own people?
I would say it's probably better to try and make it a really a really thriving environment for that business to choose to stay here rather than handcuff them, because if you handcuff them, you might then stifle that investment by mere fact that they can't get access to the right resources. You know, there's a load of headwinds that businesses face, and it is challenging to get experienced people right now to want to move over to be in Scotland. And many of my peers with businesses have actually already exited Scotland, and they're getting approached all the time by hungry countries to take their businesses over, and they're laying out a red carpet, you know.
Let me put that another way. Should the likes of Scottish Enterprise maybe have quite a substantial share or stock option in some of these companies, so it makes it much more difficult?
Yeah, I was going to make that very point, right? So there's a difference between a grant and an investment. So if you give them money with nothing coming back as a grant, then I think there should be absolute conditions round about that, round about what you're going to do. There should be a yang to that yin, right? If you put in an investment and say you take a 20% stake for 5 million and the company is valued at 25 or 20 at that time, and then it sells for 100 million and you get a 5-time return, and the Scottish Government gets 25 back for your 5, that you can then put that and ring fence that to put back into other companies. I think that should be given a chance to just go and grow as quickly as they can, and if they're sold, and then the money can be regurgitated back into the community. I think there's a bigger discussion around about this very topic, in that, and this was a discussion I had recently, is about how do we start to think about building a sovereign fund that's actually built like they've got in Norway, whereby it's not government money, it's enabled by government creating a competitive environment that brings inward investment, so that a sovereign fund is actually created inside Scotland. And I think we missed the opportunity with oil to create a sovereign fund. I think we've got an opportunity through renewable energy and leveraging what we've done through there to create a sovereign fund that actually grows into we should put a target. We will have a 30 billion sovereign fund by, 2035, right? And then start a plan in place, because you've got pretty good investment companies here, the Baillie Giffords of the world, the likes of, to start maybe looking at them to see how they could maybe help that happen. So I think putting a plan around a sovereign fund would be a good idea, rather than just giving money away.
You probably shouldn't have started on the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund. Seth, I'm not going to ask more questions around about that. Seth, do you want to comment on that?
I just want to emphasise that it's about startups, but it's about scale-ups. It's about creating a journey and a pathway all the way through. Startups can give you some great headlines, just like innovation pilots can give you great headlines, but it's not what counts in the end. They've got to come through and scale up and be real challengers domestically, create value, create growth, prosperity domestically, and then take that to the world.
Well, I'd like to thank you all for your evidence here today. I think it's been most interesting. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Kevin. I believe Michelle would like to ask a brief supplement.
Yeah, just a last question. What's your attitude and your kind of risk appetite for generative AI, or rather the kind of black box nature of it? I mean, we've been talking pretty kind of early doors usage of AI, but we all know that there's a kind of potentially, there will be challenges with generative AI and the whole kind of basis of statistical probability versus genuine cognition. In your businesses, is the attitude you're taking, we'll deal with that when I start to smell it, but we're not at that point yet, or is it something you're already actively considering?
We're actively considering that just because we operate in regulated industries. And so the point about the lethal trifecta is, if you give your agent access to information that is unverified, if you also give it access to your personal data, like your emails, your SharePoint, and if you give it the ability to communicate or externally communicate with other tools like APIs, webhooks, if it has all three of those, you have a massive problem, because there's no it can't differentiate between a malaction and an instruction. So what you're finding is people could put in a little bit of writing within the prompt comes in, and it will go off to your personal data. It will find out your bank account details, and it will then send it out to that instruction that was hidden within the prompt, and your identity and your bank account is kind of swiped. So for us, we've got a rule of 2, so it can only ever have 2. So we've got agents. We've got 9 agents that work in partnership with the human team, and they can only have 2 of those 3. So that's the first thing. And then the tools that we use with clients, we have on-prem, so all the data processing is within our control. And every piece of, there's no black box in our insight tools, so we can trace every piece of recommendation back to the original insight. And we think that's going to be important going forward when regulation catches up. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think you can be very conscious about it today.
Okay. Peter and Seth?
We're really bolted down, obviously, because we're an IP company, and if there's ever a time you've got to protect your IP, so not because we're monitoring our staff or anything, but every single keystroke that anyone in our company does is monitored and logged, just as part of the Azure DevOps, the environments. These are through the development tools. We are very. I've always lived my career in IT. The paranoid survive, and I think. Well, probably more so. But some of you guys don't think that way when you're after a couple of drinks, but that's a separate chat. But we are very careful, and we don't. I'm not really that bothered about generative AI because that's not really our thing. It's not what we use. We use the tools to make our system more efficient. This is going to sound a little bit disparaging, right? It's not meant to be, but I just see generative AI as a bit of a toy. There's only so many kind of different funny faces you can make of yourself. It's kind of, I don't really see that as a proper discussion here. I think it's more the tooling side of things that we should be discussing here, and how you use the proper tools, the proper agents, the proper, enterprise tooling to make businesses more efficient. I think that's what the discussion should be about, not about the generative stuff. We keep everything really, really locked within our organisation.
But sorry, before you commit, but I'm really talking about the risk around data. So perhaps should have been clear. Anyway.
We're very bolted down in our company. We monitor absolutely everything. Just for these very points, we're very, 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 because we run banks. We run bank. I mean, if we go, we run banks' websites, and they're, if they go down, people can't get to the bank accounts, right? So we absolutely have checks and balances, 4 eyes on everything. We are very, very, very stringent within our organisation. We take things very seriously, and we test our staff, by sending them emails and, fake malicious things. To make sure, and they get hauled up if they click on stuff, we're very, very careful on this stuff, and you need to be thinking this way. But I'll say it again: the paranoid survive.
Last word to say.
So safety, privacy, security. It has to be at the core of our business. Not only we're working in some of the most secure areas of government, we work in police as well as in the and police and fire as well as in the broader public sector. We work in nuclear as well, and we work in some very mission critical areas of the private sector. So for us, investing in systems like ISO 27001 security systems, having security by design in everything we do, that's been a part of our business for a long time. So I think as we turned ourselves into an AI business and then delivering AI for our clients, we needed to take that same sort of disciplined ethos to how we approached AI, including generative AI. And that we have to take that from both ends, really. So we have to have very strict conditions around what we use AI for, how we use it. But then we also have to have working practices and policies around auditing the results of using AI as well, and responding to that. And that's what we've built. We've invested an awful lot into our AI charter, our AI policy. The particular ISO standard I've mentioned a couple of times, it's a very new standard, 42,000 for designing and using AI. That's taken a absolutely significant investment on our part, and of both time and money. But it's absolutely crucial. If you're working in the industries in mission critical environments like we are, we have to be absolutely watertight. yes, about data, but also about the results and the downstream impacts of the models that we're building.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Well, look, can I thank the panel for their really very interesting, very wide-ranging contributions. I think we've discussed everything from the possibilities for business through to the public sector, requirements and skills and ethics. And I will just share one closing anecdote. So as we've been discussing, I have been using AI just to follow up on some of the topics, including the point around ISO. So I used Gemini to give me an explainer on what ISO 4200 was, and was profoundly confused to get a summary about steel tube manufacturing, because actually it's 42,000 that I should have asked about, which just goes to show that the old adage is true. If you put garbage in, you get garbage out. And that is a perennial truth when using technology. But look, can I thank the panel for their contributions? It has been incredibly useful, not just for this work, but we've got things like the Tertiary Education Bill going through Parliament, and I think some of the contributions around skills have been very informative for that. With that, can I thank you? And I will bring the public section to a close. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.